Hi everyone, Brian and I back again into the sessions we've started a while back to build an infinite scrolling component for Blazor, a little something that we called Virtualization, Blazor virtualization component. And Brian, last time we were basically testing the component and we stopped somewhere where we said, okay, we need to kind of rename our load first page functionality here to kind of give us a little bit more meaningful name than just load first page. We just wanted to basically have it load page, right? So, and we were going to continue to pass it the index and the amount of the count of items that we want to retrieve in, and see how that one would roll out. So what do you think about that? You want to create that code drop task real quick, kind of go back to master and hit that kind of change in there.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get it done.
Let's do it. All right.
Do you want me to do that or you? Or
Yes, sir. Yep, go for it. It's all yours. Yep.
okay, so I'll switch back to main. I'll get
All right.
share my screen.
All right.
What are the use? Are you seeing what? Oh, yep. Better share it. Huh? don't just talk. Don't just talk about
Yeah, let's do it.
it.
All right. There we go. All right.
No worries. So we'll just switch that back to main,
Yeah. Hmm.
and we should probably check out a new branch. What we call this code drop.
Yeah, let's call it code drop and then type in load page refactor or rename, load page rename. Hmm.
Yep.
All right.
So that should be fairly easy to do. So what we want to do is actually just change this to reflect what it's going to do
Yep.
for us. So I just do this with a Control RR and
Hmm.
let Visual Studio do the hard work for me. So we just
Yep.
change it like that and hit apply. That should have picked it up in the interface
Yep. I
as
see four
well.
changes. That should do the
Yeah.
trick. Yeah.
Awesome.
I wonder if the number 4 at the very bottom, is it for the changes or for the files that have been changed? Where a file could have, yeah, it's for the files. Because one
Yes.
file could have had multiple okay. I always thought
Yeah.
it was just the number of changes across all. But
Nope. Yes.
okay. All
So you
right.
want me to? There's Do we need to test that at all? No, we don't. I don't think because we haven't completed that last test. We're just doing a refactor.
Mm-hmm.
So just I guess I'll.
Yep. So just code
Hmm.
drop and then we want to do rename.
You good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that. That should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple out there.
All right. I will take care. So you can create a pull request on your side. I'll take a
Yeah.
quick look at it and then we'll merge it in. There we go.
There you go.
We're good? Okay, perfect. I'll
Yeah.
jump here on my side real quick. So here is GitHub. Let's go over there. Virtualization, pull requests, load first page, load page. All right, so it's just the rename. Yep, looks about right. All right, I'm gonna merge that guy in. And switching over to Visual Studio. So here is VS, and I'm just gonna pull latest from master here just to get these changes. I expect that pulling latest from master here will get pull origin. main, it will break a couple of things here because these tests haven't, like these mocked tests haven't changed really. See, because it wasn't a part of this change, but I can take care of that in here. That's not a problem.
Mhm.
So
I
this
thought
is
the
load page.
control RR would deal with that. I'm sorry.
No, no, but this file wasn't even in your changes because that's brand new code where we're
Ah,
using the contract of the service to make this happen, right? So that's the trick here. Okay, I got this guy right here. So this is virtualization component, retrieve data, set up load page, and then this is retrieve data and so on and so forth. This is all perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna go here and say code drop merge with master.
just
Hmm.
before you do that, do
Uh,
we? There was an issue I found. I
uh,
did a bit of research
yep.
with the virtualization components because we're using RC2 of .NET 6.
Hmm.
bUnit is not dealing with the virtualization component real well with the current version we're using. We need to grab the preview version. So do you want to do that in this, or do you want to do another code rub separately?
Yeah, let's do it in this. I think it's okay to have them both. So I'm just gonna check the include progress here. But I'm gonna go here and say, okay, so this is include pre-release. There it is. I
Yep,
see his upgrade.
yep. And that'll progress the error we're having with the test.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
yep,
Okay, so here's the deal, and you guys, I'll let Brian talk a little bit in a bit about the why we're taking in that pre-release version. There was a problem with the .NET, RC2, .NET 6 RC2 that Brian have done a little bit of research around, and he found a little bit of issues here and there, but we'll talk about that, very very shortly. Okay, I'm gonna hit this guy, merge with main. Still trying to get around the language there, Brian. So let's see. Okay. Oh, it didn't catch this one either. Interesting. Okay. Code upgrade bUnit to pre-release. Okay. So here is this guy. Okay. So we have the component, and this guy is basically saying, hey, I expected you to kind of hit load first page with 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 any just for now. So you should render and you should be loading first page in here. The idea here is that we want to go to this B virtualization component here. Here's another one and basically load the page. So the more we scroll, but I think where we stopped was, being able to kind of emulate the scrolling part, right? There's two parts actually. There's first hit, first load. That's the first part, and then the scrolling part, and that's just the first. If we can get to the first hit, first load, that would be perfect, right? Um, Now let me see here. I imagine we could probably add something to our component here where we can go and say, when the component itself is initialized, go ahead and grab some data to load in that component. What do you think about that? Should we add this as a capability in the in the component itself before we actually do even the scrolling, or does it do that outside of the box?
I think it does it outside the box. It does its virtual. It'll as soon as it loads, it'll hit that the delegate that we provided and for its initial page.
Okay.
So yep,
Okay, let's see if that, so we passed in that retrieve data to the virtualization component that we have in
yep.
here. So let
The
me,
other,
go
another
ahead.
quick fix we can do here. See, I did the t equals t. That's no longer required. In my original POC, it was required because it didn't know what the t was.
But
It
now we
actually can
know.
work. It can infer the t now from the retrieve data, so we don't need that parameter anymore.
Oh, really? That's sweet. I like
Yeah.
that. I like
And you
that.
can do. You can also do the same on the other component we have there, the base, I believe, or that is, yeah,
On the base component. Okay.
yeah,
Let's do that on the base component.
yeah.
Okay. Let's try this out. So technically, if this guy is failing on load first page, let's see if that does anything for us. Okay, So now we get a new error. It's basically saying object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Let's see, where is this guy taking me? It's taking me to the child content. So we basically wanna pass some sort of child content to this guy
Yep.
in order for it to work, right? And
So
we need, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
it has two parameters of render fragment, and it alternately chooses one or the other. So you can have child content, or you can have I think it's item template or item content.
L- Let,
Um,
mhm,
but
mhm,
it but it it chooses one or the other. And so the thing is, with child content, that's sort of used when you have no other render fragment parameters. But in this particular case, the virtualization component, you can optionally supply a loading fragment.
Okay.
Okay, so when you either use child fragment on its own, or you use the item template or item fragment, I can't remember its exact name, and with the loading fragment. So it's either one or the other two. So just giving
Okay.
you a, yeah.
Okay. I'll try to basically I'll try to create a render fragment in here as a parameter and see
Mhm.
how that works. What do you think about that?
Yep.
So I think we can do a render fragment in here, and I remember actually I'll tell you. I remember actually having, let me show you this. I built this tiny library called Pretty Blazor, where I can actually pretend that there is a fragment that was actually loading in a particular in a particular component. Let's see what I did there. I did a unit test there where I actually pretended that there is a component when there isn't really. It's just a fake component just to see if things have loaded correctly. So let's see if I can
This
pull
would
out.
be in your this would be on the iterator component. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So if you go to Pretty Blazor tests, iterations,
Yeah.
this guy here. So what did I do here? I basically went in and said, okay, these are the parameters. Create parameter, okay, these are parameters. And then create render fragment. There it is. There it is. And I'm pretty sure this guy was like crazy kind of weird thing that I had to do. Let me see here. So create random items. Get random number, create render fragment. This guy right here. So I'm gonna steal this guy. I'm gonna steal this guy here, and we'll see if we can. It's also weird. Look at this. Do you see the?
Yeah, it's taking a parameter. So it's taking a parameter of type T. So that's a render
Right,
fragment type T.
right. So okay. So let me go back here. I think we chose object for our test for now. So I'm gonna go back to our code here real quick, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go here and say, okay, here's an example. Here's a render fragment. And let me see if I can fix this. There you go, render fragment. Come on, right? And our render fragment takes type T, but because we're doing it on an object here just for testing purposes, I'm gonna say object here. So that's
Yep.
our guy. And then the other thing I think we need to do is to basically create that. So I'm gonna go here and say, just for now, this is render child component,
Content.
child content. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it again.
That's right. That's right. You never learn. It's a problem. It's a little problem. And then and then I also remember and then I also remember having the sum iteration component, which is basically a dummy component. I don't know if I actually used it or not. I'll check here real quick before we jump over. Yeah, I did do some iteration component. So back here, I basically need just a dummy model in here. And this dummy model basically is just helping. Let's see, is this the end of this guy? Yeah, perfect. So I can go here and say this is some iteration component. And I'm going to say this is an object, something like this. And what else? It's basically saying the non-generic method type cannot be used with type arguments. I think I still just need to say, okay, let's see. So I just need to go and say type of, right? And then let's see, this is your some iteration component with object in there. I think that's how I did it. So this guy here returns a render fragment. Fragment just like this. That's my render fragment right here. Now, this guy needs to be passed in. I'm gonna go and steal again, see how the so render fragment, and then we said it's taking a type object, and then I passed in this render fragment as a child content. As a
Is that a
child
render
content.
fragment or a render fragment of type object?
It's actually under fragment of type object. It is. That's the error, I think. That's all that it was. There it is.
Yep.
So now we want to pass this as a parameter, into that component, right? And I wish I might someday come up with a better way than doing this. This is just me saying, hey, whatever that component may be, let me just create and I'm just in here, I'm just gonna say some content, or some component actually, because it's some component. So this is just me saying the type here doesn't matter. It's just a filler in to say, hey, I want to add in that component in there. So there's that guy there for a second for Visual Studio. Even Visual Studio got the flu. What are we gonna do now, Brian? So for you guys watching us, I kind of took a longer nap and I missed my time with Brian, and and he was kind enough to say, okay, whenever you're ready, doesn't matter. It's just I guess I guess I'm there now, Brian. I just
Just
randomly
for the
just
viewer's sake, I told him to have a sleep. He needed
he did.
it.
He did. He did. He said, "That's odd. You don't sleep enough. You don't go out there and sleep." And I was like, "No, I really have fun. I really want to do this with you. I really do have fun." Brian is a good friend. He's a great, great guy. Okay, so child content, and now I can go here and say component parameters. Let's see, parameters. Let's see. It should be called component parameters. Let's see if I can. Yep, there it is. There is our parameter. And this guy gets created a little bit differently. So you have to go and say create cascading, create parameter. We're going to talk about cascading values in a little bit, right, Brian? So we can go here and say name of, right? And this is my B virtualization component of whatever. And then type in, give me the child content in here.
Yep.
So that's basically what I'm passing in as a name.
Mhm.
And then the parameter itself is actually the child content itself,
Mhm.
right? So technically, if I take this guy here, and when I am rendering my component, if I pass this in here, that should technically not freak out when it comes to passing in. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know if the context piece is going to work, Ryan. We'll see. We'll see.
I
It
think
should.
I'm,
There's no
I'm
reason for
quietly
it.
confident.
You're
I'm
quietly
quietly
confident.
confident.
Okay. Okay. I trust you. I trust your judgment. Trust your judgment. You're right. It passed. So guys, look at this. This is really, really beautiful. Like we're basically going and saying, verify that load page will be called as soon as we basically render the component. It will go and render the component. It'll actually render in that child content in there. I could go the extra mile and basically say something to the effect of, tell me that this rendered component, check this out, rendered component dot instance dot child content should be equivalent to, and then uh, our child content in here. Let's see if that would actually, this is me kind of fortifying the test. Basically going and saying, let me add in more assurances. Let me add in more stuff in there. I don't know if that's gonna fly, but we'll see. Yeah, it did. That's nice. So that means if anyone goes in at any point in time and says, in the UI itself of that component, if someone tries to be smart and just does this test is going to fail. Why?
Mhm.
Because the test is basically saying, no, you actually have to render the child component. Um, we might actually need to add a reference. This will still pass. No, no, it didn't. No, that's perfect. See, that's it. Perfect,
Yeah,
perfect.
the underlying component won't accept
Yep. Yep, yep,
a
yep.
null.
So this is it. This is what I call fortification. We're basically adding in more power to the component. Okay, so that's some great news, right? I
Yeah,
think. I don't know.
that's this is actually significant. We've actually got the hard part done. I think it's all downhill from here, to be quite honest.
Yes, that's the hard part. And usually when you're creating something like worth its while, there's always this tricky part, you know, like this pretty Blazor was just an like in concept in my head it was simple, but testing it, this is where it kind of gets your brain to kind of, okay, so let me just clean up a couple of things here. This is child content, you know, and I'm gonna go here and say, okay, let's create two of these. Let's go wild. Let's go here and say, um, um, uh, this is input child content. And then I'm gonna go here and say render fragment object expected child content. And that would be the same as the input child content, just to preserve the language. Input child content in here. And then I'm gonna take this guy, and that would be my point of comparison, basically. And then, yeah, I think we got ourselves a
Yep.
good thing in here. So one more run just for everything, just to make sure things are passing, and then we can talk about the next step. This is great. This is beautiful. So here's the thing for you. I think we still need to let me pass this in. Should render component. Let me put this in as pass. That's our guy. Now here's the deal. I think we still need to think about allowing people who will be using your virtualization component to pass in parameters like start from where, start from, and count, right?
um,
We
Pass
have to,
in the
right?
parameter.
Yeah.
Why? It'll always want to start at the top of the list. You're thinking maybe we're going to start half scrolled? What are you
You could
thinking?
you could you could do that, and also how do you know how much at a time are you gonna iterate on?
It knows. It does. You see, the virtualization component. This is why it needs the delegate. Okay,
Right.
so it
Oh. Mm, mm,
so it's actually doing some JavaScript calls, and it's communicating with, and it's finding out the size of the view screen, the area that it's been displayed in, and it's also talking to the scroll bar, and the scroll bar is telling it its position, and it's also
mm.
setting the scroll bars. I've never done much with scroll bars, but I'm guessing you're sort of setting its range. You're saying, you're a scroll bar that represents 1,000,000 records. You're a scroll bar that represents 1,000 records. I guess it's got to set the size of the scroll bar, and it's got to set the position in the scroll bar. So and also, so it does that. It sets that with the JavaScript. It also uses the JavaScript to calculate the how many items can fit on a page, and that's what it then feeds that into the delegate that we pass it to know how many items to request.
So okay, so hear me out. So what if I go here and say, here's the deal. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's Brian, that's me. Okay. So let's say, just I'm gonna go up in here and basically add in, a page just for testing. I'm gonna go here and add in a page, and this is a page where I'm gonna be using, whatever. I'm just gonna go here and say pages. I'm gonna delete this one later. But let's say I'm adding in here a Blazor page. This is a Razor component like this. And let's say this is, delete me page. Okay. So here's the deal. I'm going in, I'm the user now. I'm the one using this library. And I'm going in and saying, I want to use the B virtualization component, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let me scroll back down and let me take this out. Let me go here and say using, right? So this is my B virtualization component, right? What are the options that I have here? I have content. I know that I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy here, let's say, goes in here and says, okay, this is, I don't know, let's say a div, for instance, and it has a
Mm-hmm.
label, and the label have some stuff in it. Okay,
Yep.
that's the first one. That's the child content that we're passing in, right?
Yep.
But other than that, other than I have a type, I have context, I have child content, but I can't tell this thing how many it should pull at a time.
It
Doesn't
doesn't
matter. Do
get
we
to,
want to?
it,
Go ahead, go ahead.
it doesn't matter. It works that it does that itself. This is what I'm trying to. I'm using bad language.
No,
I'm
no, no,
not
you're
explaining
fine. Please. No,
that.
I'm still, the flow is still playing in my head. I'm still
Yeah,
trying to, yep, yep, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. The virtualization component, you don't tell it how many. items it's rendering. You tell it how much space. It basically knows how much space it's got on the screen. It knows it has a default number of pixels it has for each row item. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and based on the space in the number of pixels, it calculates how many items it will request.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
I see what you're
so
saying.
it has parameters where you can actually set the size of the items in pixels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and when they also suggest, or they don't say you have to, but for example, you can when you're actually creating, in this case, you're consuming the component, you can actually say that you can put it in a div that has a fixed height.
Mm.
Okay. Yep.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then I'm assuming like the other thing that we really need to do is the instantiation of the service itself, like
Yeah.
the service that we're
Yes.
passing in. And this, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I thought to myself, okay, we might either need another component up a level, or we need to change how we instantiate in here.
Hmm.
Basically, ideally, my thought process here would be something to the effect of, okay, you're passing in, actually
You
this.
can you can't really inject a service of type T, because if, or you can, but it'll only ever be one type. How do you make that more flexible? Because you're going to have a whole heap of component. Every time you want a component of a different type, you're going to have to set up a different injection.
Right, so there's that part, and also there
Yeah.
is the part about, so what would actually be here is not the injection of the service. We might actually need to move the service instantiation inside, because this is like
Yep.
a, like this, and then this guy will tell you, hey, I need the data source,
Hmm.
right? And this data source is a broker, so it's gonna do all this instantiation, and all that it's really offering as a parameter is an iQueryable of T. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
So the only thing that comes through here would be an iQueryable of T, and that would be what we call a data source. Data
Hmm.
source, like this. And this data source, I'm just trying to see how can I
See,
possibly, go ahead, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So in my POC, so your data source is equivalent to what I was calling my uh, the query. So I wasn't actually passing in a data source. I was passing in a query, which I would append to the OData call that I was making. So
Right. Hmm.
my understanding of what you're trying to bring to the party here is, with your iQueryable library, is somehow we can use the iQueryable library to basically pass through our the filters we want, or
Yep,
yeah, yeah,
yep.
or
You're
the
passing in your
sort,
own. Yep, yep.
yeah, or the sort order, or all that sort of stuff, all that nice stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to basically, I need to verify that. Because now if this component is doing this instantiation internally, I need to somehow verify that these dependencies have actually been called appropriately, right?
Hmm.
And the only way we can do that, I know how we can do that. It's going to be really simple. On the data source itself that's coming in, if we mock that data source, we might be able to kind of go and say, verify that this call has happened, right?
Hmm.
Whatever the service underneath that's doing that work, it doesn't matter because this is a library, right? And
Hmm.
that's a little bit architecturally different, but it's exactly what I'm going for here. So if I go here and say private read-only I virtualization service of T, and this is my virtualization service in here, and I also want a private read-only I data source broker. So that's my guy here.
It was T as well, I believe.
Yeah, and of course the Visual Studio has to kind of so it would be something like this. And of course it won't understand what this is because why would it? So let's do that. I've been seeing this on and off pairing with people. I've been seeing this on and off. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It
Mm.
confuses me. So there's this T, and then this is your data source broker, like this, and then all your instantiations are happening inside this guy. I don't know if it treats this guy as an initializer though. We'll see. So this guy, if I go here and say data source broker equal new data source broker, like this, data source broker of type
So
T. It
So
won't because it's read-only. Mhm.
what I did in this situation, if it wasn't taking external parameters and we're constructing this stuff, you can actually create a constructor and do it inside there instead
Just
of
a
on
normal
initialize.
constructor, like
Yes.
an
See, it's on
initializer
here.
like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, you can go in and say, okay, on the initialization. And I wonder if this uninitialized is basically technically doing that. It's just recalling your. Let's find out. So this is the broker, data source broker, and I basically went in and I said, let's see, this dot new data source broker like this, right? And this
I,
guy's.
I, I was actually really worried about calling a constructor in a component, but I went and did a fair bit of reading, and there's no real documentation to say that it's bad. There's documentation that's showing that other people are doing it. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, okay, so let me see. So I have two data sources in here. Why do I do that? There's this guy out. These things need to go up there. Let's see. Just exploring, just seeing if we can. So, okay, so there's my guy, and then I can go here and say, this is my virtualization service, new virtualization service of T that takes in this data source, basically, this dot data source broker, basically. So that's what this guy could do, but now these are completely hidden parameters. So the only way that you can do to basically verify that the right calls have happened is this guy. Your only option is this guy right here.
Mhm.
And this guy, this
and
guy,
and and the sorry and the delegate.
and the delegate, right? Well, the
Mhm.
delegate basically, the delegate is not an input parameter, right?
Mhm.
Right? So,
Yeah, I
let me
see what
see.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see
Yeah.
here. Let me organize this a little bit. This is fun. This is turning into. See, you never know with Brian. You never know how the day is gonna go, which is a great thing. That's the thing I like about programming. You never know. So here, here's what we can do. Let's see. This guy's getting a little bit larger. Just trying to make the. And this guy is load page. This guy's returning an iQueryable of T. That's my data. And this guy returning a count. So that's an integer. Okay, so now that changes our test a little bit, right? That basically means that your components in here, this guy is not visible anymore. You have a thing in here called data source, and this data source should be null, rightfully so. But also more importantly, your your input parameters as services and all that will disappear. You don't really care about that. Completely out, which means that this guy goes out. And now we need to come up with some sort of a mock of the data source itself.
Mhm.
So my wonder here is to be able to go and say, let's try it out. So if I say private mock I queryable of object, and this is some data source mock. I don't know if it'll let us do that stuff, but we'll see. One way to find out. Uh, Why do you not want to mock namespace? Let's see. Cannot be used for type arguments, right? What did I have before? Just a sec. Yeah, I just replaced this with iQueryable. I don't think mock. Yeah, there you go. No, I was just typing it wrong. Okay, so if I take this guy up in here and I go like this, private mock, and then iQueryable of type T, and this is data source mock, just like this. And I can basically go here and say, okay, and I can move that internally into the service itself. But I basically want to go here and say, yeah, okay, define this guy as a data source mock equal new data source mock. Great. Now, the one thing I just want to do just to verify this stuff is that I'm going to go here, I'm going to take this out because I don't really care about the not yet the end result. I just want to know what kind of calls have happened on this data source mock. This test will fail, of course, because this test will try to go and say, it'll basically, yeah, hold on. No, that's more than just a failure. That's basically, so try specifying the time argument specifically. Let's see where that is. So this is, let me build the solution here real quick, Brian, just to see.
Hmm? I'm learning here, so I'm just sitting here with my mouth open.
Yeah. Oh, it's on the delete me page. Yeah, there's still miles and miles to go to when it comes to kind of detecting issues in a Blazor component, there's still a lot of problems to do here to solve here. But anyway, this guy was basically saying, okay, the page has a problem. I think that something else should have a problem. That shouldn't be enough. No, that's it. It was just complaining about the page. Okay, fine. All right, let's go here and run this guy and see. This guy's supposed to fail, but it will fail because I did verify no other calls. There it is.
Hmm.
So what is this guy saying? Virtualization service error occurred, contact support, argument null. So this guy value cannot be null. So where is this happening?
Source is what we're
In
saying.
source. Yeah. Let's see. So this happened when we tried to render, and it's
So,
go ahead.
yeah, did we pass in a?
Uh,
Did we pass in the delegate this time?
no, the
This
delegate
is.
is not an input parameter though. We create
Uh,
that privately from within, right?
but the error is coming from the virtualization component saying that it doesn't have a source. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
think I think it's the iQueryable.
So, okay.
Yeah, I think it's
Yes.
like this data source broker here is basically saying if I put a breakpoint in here and I just do like this, debug, it should stop right here, and it will say I'm trying to work with the iQueryable and there's no data there, something to that effect. Check this out. So if I go inside this guy here, I put a breakpoint here. So this data source here is coming in as null. So
Hmm.
whatever I did to mock this thing, it's not working. It's not working. So I probably forgot something. Let's see. I forgot something in the mocking. Let's see. So oh, I didn't pass it in. I didn't pass it in. That's why, right? So I needed to create another parameter, right? So let's see
Hmm.
here. Let's see here if this guy will allow me to add in parameters, not just one parameter. I think I did something similar also in Pretty Blazor. Oh, it won't let me. That's foolish. Well, one sec. Technically, I can just do an array of component parameters, and that'll take care of everything for me. So this guy here like this, and then here's the first parameter, and I can go get down here and say component parameter dot create parameter, and then name of b virtualization component of object dot data source, right?
Hmm.
And then this guy will take in the this dot data source mock dot object. That will do the trick. It should.
Yep.
I don't know. Do you think it'll do the trick? I think it will.
But, yep.
Let's find out. All right. I'm awake now. All right. I'm back online. So let's see how that works. I hope that works. Let's see. Okay. So now no, it's still a little not happy. So let's say value cannot be null still. How could that be possible? Let's see. So and so this is a data source mock object, and I'm pretty sure I instantiated that sucker in here. Yeah, this data source mock right here. I'll do this because I don't trust what this guy has done. It should have, but I'll do this. I'll go up in here and do this. I'll go and say, okay, hey, instantiate it right here with the object, and let's just see what that does. It could be something else for sure, but we'll see. Okay, so the value cannot be null. Let me go. Yeah, it's still not seeing a real data source being passed in, and that's why it's not happy with the data that it is being shown. I wonder if this data source mock.setup, let's see, source dot, it has expression, it has provider, it has a whole bunch of stuff. Just out of curiosity, I'll just go up in here and do this. New list. I will create a random one and then measure the outcome and see if that works for us. So object and then as queryable, right? And as queryable of object. Okay, so this guy, okay, and this guy here, I'm just gonna go in here and say, here's an iQueryable of object, some data source. I'll show you what I'm gonna do now. It's gonna be fun. So I can pass in this data source in here as a parameter. And then I bet you this guy will be much happier. No, still? Oh, something must be really off. This is some data source. We're passing in the data source here. Interesting. Okay, let's debug this sucker. I must have this is the data source broker. I'm gonna jump in by 1. And the data source is null. It could be the component itself. How did I not? Maybe it's not hitting this guy at all, Brian. Just
Mm.
for funsies, I'm gonna skip that part, and then I'm gonna go here. These guys are not gonna be read-only anymore because they're because when you say render component, I don't think really it's calling what we think it's calling. I don't think really it's actually initializing it this way. Just a thought.
Mm.
Check this out. You want to bet this one might pass?
No.
I I don't bet either. So see, this one now is a this one is now a completely different guy. It's a completely
Oh, we
different
moved
beast.
it. Yeah.
So why is that? It's basically saying this guy actually is nothing because I removed the instantiation for it. Now let me kind of reverse. This is all. By the way, guys, we haven't. This is not staged. We're thinking live. Not thinking out loud, thinking
Yeah.
live. I should make this the new title of my new book, Thinking Live, you know? So, okay, let's try this. This data source mock equal new.
Don't watch this while you're eating breakfast.
Yes, don't try this at home. Okay. I think if I go up in here and say this dot data source mock dot object, I may still get the same. This time I shouldn't get null. I should get some other error that says, hey, you said verify no other calls, but this thing happened. There it is. What is this thing saying? So object reference, but where is it failing now? Yeah, let me debug this guy because I need to still set this up to kind of return data when there is data there. So I don't know what iQueryable is doing underneath, to be honest with you. But we might just end up creating our own type kind of thing, something like an I collection or I virtualization collection, and that sucker will be easy to test. But we'll see, one thing at a time. So let's see here. So this data source, yeah, this guy has data in it, right? But this guy is probably trying to access something more, right? And my
Mm.
guess here is that um, here's what I can do. I can go up in here and say, this dot data source mock dot setup and this source dot skip.
You're gonna mock the output from the call.
Yeah, if it gives me the option, skip. Yep, and it is any int, so that's one.
You went?
Or uint, yeah, that's right.
No.
But we map it, right? We map it to int, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this skip to int will basically return something. And then out of that skip, we need another mock that will say return another thing. And this way it won't blow up. It won't freak
Mm-hmm.
out, I think. So let me do this. iQueryable object random data new list of objects. And then I'm going up in here and saying as queryable. Oop, as queryable like this. Of course, let's see. Would it actually maintain? Let's see. This is lookup already defined. Okay. Some random data. Okay. So I have this guy, and then what I can do here is that when this is called as skip like this, return some random data. So that's one. And then I can also go back and say this some random. I actually need to pass another. Here's what I can do. I can go up in here and say this dot object. It's a little crazy. Setup and then source. So we do skip and then take, right? That's how we do it. Okay, it is any int, and then this guy now will return some data. That's what I think might work. Some data. So you see what I did there? I have it
Yeah.
return itself. I don't know what's Mock gonna think about that, but it's always fun to see. And let's run this and see what happens. Unsupported expression. So it doesn't like the skip part. How about get? Setup. It has setup get like this. But I don't think skip is a get though. That's the thing. Let's try it. Expression is not a property access. Yeah, it doesn't like that. So remember how that was the whole reason why we built this broker. We basically went in and said, you know, I don't want to be, I don't want to deal with mocking the iQueryable, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and do, you know, that. It's basically saying not supported exception, unsupported expression, skip, object. It is any int, um, may not be used in setup verification expressions. What about this one? If I just do this, does it freak out? Because maybe it's just freaking out about the specific no, it doesn't like that at all. There's another option that we have for testing this, which is us basically going and saying, I'm gonna give you a random list of objects, right? Like I'm gonna go up in here and say, okay, forget about this. Here's some random data that you have in here.
I think we've got to fill this up, haven't we?
Yep, and then fill it up with some
Mhm.
stuff, and then I can comment this one. I bet you this one would pass because this one basically will go and say, okay, I'll just go and execute. So we basically kind of, we can, yeah, there you go. So it
Mhm.
basically goes and says, let me test the side effect of this. But that basically really means that we have to count all the some component objects that have actually been rendered on the screen. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? Like I will need to go in here and say, okay, if I'm passing in some object in here for all intents and purposes, let's just go in here and say, here's a new list, and this is, I don't know, a string, blah, like this. And this is an object, and I can go here and say as queryable of objects, bring it back to this. I need to
Mhm.
go down in here and say something like this. I need to go and say, this dot rendered component dot find dot instance dot find.
We we could run into trouble here
Why?
because
Mhm.
the underlying component will request more than it displays.
It doesn't matter. It still keeps the reference. I think.
Uh,
I think. So if I take that some component, that render fragment that I have in here, I'm basically telling it go and find in this render component all the instances of this sum component stuff,
Hmm.
right? Would that work? I don't know. Let's find out. I think this guy is an object or something. Let's see. What are you? Sum component. Yeah. So let's see here. It's basically saying non-invocable member sum component cannot be used like a method. Hold on. Find components, right? And it takes in an input parameter. Oh, it's looking for a component type to search it up. So it's this guy. Would it be happy with this? Requires one type argument. How did I do this before? One sec. So in the iteration, I basically.
You're missing an angle bracket
Oh, is that it? That's all? Ha!
on the other side.
Thank you, Brian. That's sweet. You see, I'm thinking 1,000 other things. Thank you. So this here is going to give me a list of things, list of rendered components. And now I can go up in here and say, okay, how many do you have? See? So this guy's supposed to give me how many? One, right? Ah, I skipped it. Let's try this again. Here we go. Okay, how many are these? If this is one, I'm gonna be very happy. Yes, look at this. So it basically said whatever components you passed to me,
Hmm.
I went and I skipped and rendered, and I basically gave you back the amount. But this is where it comes in the idea of should our test also includes that even if we pass in 50, it'll actually render 5.
Hmm.
Yes? Do you agree?
Yeah. I don't know. Is that in the realms of what we're testing? Are we? This is sort of the scope of testing, isn't it? Are we testing what the virtualization component does?
Yeah, we're not testing. You're right. We're not testing the skipping part. You know what? You're right. Okay, so and I have a and I also have a queryable filler in here, so I can just go up in here and say, okay, here's your random guy. I'm feeling a little bit better about that one. So I can go up in here and say, okay, dude, this is your data source. Here's your from random data. I'm gonna go up in here and say I queryable object input data source random data like this. And retrieve data is outside of the scope of this. And then I can take in that input data in here. Let's see what we're gonna do with this. So input data is gonna be in here. That's your input data source. And then I also want an expected data source. So I'm gonna go up in here and say iQueryable expected data source. And this guy will be input data source like this, right? And then I can go up in here and say something to the effect of, one second. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna take that expected data source here and basically go and say, okay, number one, I wanna go here and make sure that my rendered component.instance.data source should be equivalent to expected data source. So that's the first one. And then the second one here is me going in there and saying find all these components. And these components should be also equivalent to the expected data source, which is this guy. Should be equivalent to expected data source. But it'll only be on the count, right? Because this sum component is not necessarily, yeah, it would be something like this. Count
Yeah.
should be equivalent to should be because it's a static value and then expected data source
Up
dot
here.
count. I think that is a great POC.
Mhm.
So if I go here, yeah, so let's run this real quick. Yeah, what do you think?
Looking good.
So I'm basically saying here's a data source, and you're gonna render a list of components that match the data source. I want to dig one step deeper and just want to make sure that what's inside this rendered component actually, but there is no way to tell because that's something that the end user could do whatever they want with the context. For all I care, they could be just printing blah 50
Mhm.
times. They're not
Mhm.
using any of the context, any of the data. My what I'm wondering about here is that maybe these some components, like if I go here, let me try this. If I go here and say, okay, these are some components rendered components equal like this. Do these render components have like have a way where we can verify the data that's inside of it? You know what I mean? So if I go here and say, give me the first one, would this give me some sort of, does it have context in there?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could see what the context was.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be it. Render count. Yeah, it's not really giving me much. Let's explore this option tomorrow. I think
Yep.
technically we have a solution. I'm gonna
Mhm.
commit this as a POC. So I'm just gonna go here because we still need to kind of destroy everything and start over in a way.
Yep.
But basically what I'm thinking here is that, Brian, is that we want to be able to go and say, um, I want to really verify that maybe if we reconfigure the component, the dummy component that we're creating to kind of render some context just to verify that you're actually getting the actual data, that would be
Mm.
enough for me. I don't know about you, but that would be enough for me. It's basically saying, no, I'm rendering that component and I actually have the context, and this is exactly the random value that you just generated in an iQueryable. What do you think about that?
Yep. I'm not real strong with the big unit testing at all, so I'm just happy. I'm happy we got as far as we did today. As far as you know,
Progress.
yeah,
There will always be progress. We know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
We just wanna be progressing in the right direction. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, as usual, Brian, anything else you want to say to people before we wrap it
No.
up? Sir, as usual, thank you so much, and thank you for your kindness and forgiveness for allowing me to nap a little bit longer. I know you said you don't have to come at all, but this is just what a good friend would say, and I'm really excited about this. This is how excited I am. I prefer coding over sleep. This is a thing. Don't try this at home. Don't prefer coding over sleep. That's a bad thing. But I'm looking forward to our session tomorrow. I think we're really, really close, Brian. I think we can
I think
productionize
we
this
are.
thing really fast, and we can start, kind of do performance testing and stress testing on this, and show people how we can use fancy things like .NET Benchmark and all these kind of awesome libraries out there. I'll just bring the testing perspective, if anything, and we'll kind of hive
I
mind
can't.
and yeah, go ahead.
I can't wait until I start pulling it into some other libraries. I want to show you
Yeah.
guys. So.
Yes. 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 Real some really some really really great libraries out there. Okay. Thank you so much again, and thank you guys for your patience for watching in, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.